Welcome to Holly's Pandorium, featuring your host, Psychic Medium, Holly Jordan.
Welcome back, everybody. Hi, this is Holly, and I'm glad to be back here today, and I'm so excited. Oh my gosh. This is my very first ever on the podcast in 4 years. Woohoo! Having an astrologist on here. So I am so excited. I can't even stand it. I was working doing some videography last night, and I think I grabbed like 3 people. Guess what I'm doing tomorrow? Because I just love this subject. I have been interested in astrology since I was in junior high, and everybody's, peeked at it once or twice or heard something. When I bartended in college, astrology was an icebreaker, and it was, the local newspaper. This is how old I am. We did not have the internet. Okay. We would get the local paper at the bar, and I would grab the cartoons for my breaks and always read the astrology. And if somebody new came in, especially, or even my regulars, they would count on me to read their horoscope for them, because it was kind of just a distraction. It was just a fun thing. And even if it meant nothing to them, it was that personal contact of just something about yourself that maybe you didn't know, or maybe something affecting you that you had no idea. Well, that's why I feel crabby today, or wow, something good's on the way. It was just that little bit of joy for a second, a little bit of fun. And so I cannot wait to hear what this nice lady has to say. This is Susan Reynolds. She's got over 40 years of experience doing this, and she does what's called Karmic Astrology, and I cannot wait to hear what on the world is that. So hello, Susan. Thank you for being here today.
My pleasure. Thanks for inviting me on. This all happened and came together kind of very quickly.
It did.
So it's one of those things that's just, I don't know, meant to be. It's just working and falling into place. So I love astrology, and I love sharing any knowledge, wisdom, or any questions I can answer about astrology. I love it. It's my very favorite subject.
That's great. That's great. What made you gravitate towards astrology, and how old were you when you started checking it out?
Well, I was a teenager when I started to check it out. I read Linda Goodman's Sun Signs. So I think that came out sometime in the 70s.
Oh, yeah.
And I read that book, and it was like a light bulb went on, because my mother was a Taurus, my father was a Taurus, my sister was a Taurus, and I'm not a Taurus. So I grew up in this family surrounded by them. And when I read that book, it was like, that's why they're like that. Like, I finally understood.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
But I didn't start to, learn astrology until I was in my late 20s. I lived in Atlanta. And at that time, there was a place in Atlanta called Foundation of Truth. And they offered all kinds of classes and lectures and talks on lots of different spiritual, metaphysical subjects. So I decided to sign up for a tarot class. I said, I'm going to learn to read these tarot cards. And the Night Rider deck was like the only one that was available way back then. So I signed up, and I said, oh my goodness, this is way too complicated. The star means this, and the robe means that. If it's upside down, it means something totally different. I was like, I need something easier than this. So I signed up for an astrology class. I went, oh, this is much easier. Like, I can do this. And you're laughing because astrology is actually a little bit more challenging.
It is.
Yeah, a lot of people tell me that. But it just felt like I had come home, like, oh, I can understand this. I know this. So it was easy for me to just take a class. And by the time I signed up for my intermediate astrology class, friends were asking me to read their chart, or, family members were saying, well, what about me? I'm a Leo or whatever. So it happened pretty smoothly for me.
That's awesome. So what is your horoscope sign? I must ask.
I'm a Cancer.
Okay.
So you've got this sensitive little water sign around these practical earth sign Tauruses. So I'm making all my decisions based on what I feel, and they're making their decisions based on logic and reason and rationality.
Right.
So there was a lot of learning about each other in my household.
I bet. So you kind of dove in head first pretty quickly, it sounds like. So
yeah,
you've gone from, just reading for friends. So what do you do now? And what is Akashic related to astrology? How does that happen?
I will tell you, I had no intention of ever becoming a professional astrologer. I liked it. I was interested in it. I thought it was wonderful. And I was happy to just keep it as a hobby and an interest the rest of my life. And at that time, this was now, I think in the early 80s, I had a spiritual teacher. And he asked me to read for him, to read his astrology chart for him, which I did. And at the end of that reading, he said, Susan, you're really gifted at this. You need to do this professionally. I said, oh, no. I had a corporate job in corporate America. I was horrified by the idea of, hanging on an astrology shingle. And he didn't argue with me. But a week later, I got a phone call from somebody who was a client of his, who said, Ben told me I'm supposed to call you up and get a reading. And I said, no, you don't understand. I'm not an astrologer. I'm just a student. I've only had a few classes. She was like, yes, he told me you would say that. And he told me I was to insist on getting a reading. And this woman and I argued for 20 minutes on the phone about whether I would read for her or not. And finally I said, oh, all right, but don't blame me because I don't know anything. And that woman was my first client, and she's still a client today. 40
really?
Years later.
I love that.
That's how I became a professional astrologer.
Oh my gosh.
It found me much more than I found it. But I'll tell you a story about, I bill myself as a karmic astrologer, and I do that very thoughtfully, because when I read a chart, I do it a little bit differently than maybe what most astrologers do. Not saying it's better or worse, just my style. I've been reading for clients part-time, nights and weekends, for about a year maybe. And this woman called me up, booked an appointment, and I was meditating on her chart, because I always meditate my client's chart to this day before I sit down to read for them. And I was meditating on this woman's chart, and very spontaneously, I moved into an altered state and had a vision of another lifetime for this woman. And in this lifetime, she was a housewife, a mother. She lived in Ireland. She had what we would consider a lot of kids, like 7 or 8 kids. They did not have a lot of money. Her husband worked in the field. And she was a good woman. And she did her best to raise her children. And then I think she died in her 50s. Mm-hmm. And then the vision faded away. And I was like, oh my goodness, what am I supposed to do with this? Am I supposed to tell her? This was the 80s. I thought, it may take everything she's got to get an astrology reading, and I'm going to start talking about past life mumbo jumbo to her. Right. I kept going back and forth. Do I tell her? Do I not tell her? Didn't know what to do. Finally, I said, well, you know what? If I had this vision come to me, I wasn't even seeking it. It's probably for her, so I should tell her. But I said, before I do anything else, before I start to read for her in any way or get into the chart, I'm going to tell her this first. And if she doesn't like it or she's upset, she can leave, and, I just wouldn't charge her anything. So young woman, lovely, professional, comes in, sits down, and I start to tell her about this past life. And I was a bit embarrassed to tell her about this because it was so boring and dumb and uninteresting. And I wanted a lifetime where she was in the Civil War, or she, was a pirate, or, something exciting.
Something cool.
Something cool. And I have this very humdrum life to tell her about. So I told her about it. And she burst into tears. And she said, oh my God, that explains my whole life. So gradually she started to share with me. She was born into a large Irish Catholic family in Boston. Loving, good parents, nice siblings. But the girls in the family, the females, even if they went to college, they got married. and they had kids, and they may get a job to help out here and there at the family, but she knew she wanted a career. She didn't want a little job to help out with the kids or whatever. She wanted a career, and she became a lawyer, and she was, working on becoming partner at this very prestigious law firm. And so she said, I always felt guilty that I wasn't following the path that my family expected. I always felt guilty that I wanted something else for my life. And now I know why. And as I was talking to her, I could just see these layers of, I don't know, guilt or stress just leave. She looked younger right in front of me.
Wow.
And so I said, okay, if this ever happens again, I'm going to share it right off the bat. And it kept happening again and again and again. And now, before I talk to my client, I'm always going to do a meditation. And I almost always will start to see past life information. I will start to see what karma they're working on. What is their spiritual life goal? What do they come into this earth to learn? Why is such and such difficult for them? What are the gifts they brought in from other lifetimes? And I find that often answers a lot of questions for people. It's like somebody hits that sweet spot. They get it. They understand what I'm talking about. So I work from a very spiritual and karmic point of view. I'm going to let you know what your Venus is doing and how Saturn is impacting things, but I do it in a different way. So it's a little bit odd reading. I open that doorway after I've connected with my client's energy, and I never know what's going to happen. Sometimes their spirit guide will come in and start talking to me. Sometimes a passed on relative shows up. Sometimes I'll see a vision right in the middle of the reading about something they're supposed to know about. I never know what's going to happen, which is why it's still so exciting and fun to me. Every reading is new to me still after all this time.
That's amazing. And so technically, I would say you're a psychic astrologer because you're doing psychic things in your astrology. You're connecting with another energy level and another part. And maybe astrology opened the door to let your brain relax, to let new information in. I believe we're all born with psychic gifts and that we tend to stifle them just because culturally they don't work in logical society and pragmatic society, but they are part of who we are. It's definitely part of who we are. So you also mentioned in your bio information that I was reading that you do work with angels as well. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, many people use the word spirit guide and angels interchangeably.
Right.
And I have no problem with that. But they're different. They have different roles in our life. They work with us in different ways. Spirit guides are with us from the moment we're born and come into a physical body to the moment we leave this earth.
Right.
Their whole job is to help us achieve our spiritual goals that we came into this lifetime to learn about. And if we have to go through a difficult experience to get to the place we want to get to learn the things we want to learn, they're not going to stop that. They're going to help us reach our goals. That's their whole job. And so it took me a long time before I realized, why don't I ask my spirit guides to show me the easy way to do this? Let me hit that easy button, because that's their job. And I want to learn those things. Most of us want to learn those things. We put them in our chart to learn. And our spirit guide helps us get there. They're not allowed. Angels and spirit guides, neither one of them are allowed to interfere in our life. And so many people say, well, they know what I want and what I need. Why don't they just do that? Because that's not their job. That's our job.
Right.
They're there to help us, guide us. Spirit guides. It's literally in the title we call them. Spirit guides will always have had at least one lifetime on Earth. Sometimes many, but at least one. Because they need to understand what we're going through on Earth. They need to know what it's like to be hungry or thirsty or have your body hurt or feel betrayed by a friend or be afraid or grief-stricken. They need to understand what human experience is like. How can you explain that? Help somebody if you have no experience. It's, it's like somebody who's never had kids go, okay, now you breathe deep and you'll be fine. They're sort of missing the point. We want somebody who
Right.
knows what that's like.
Exactly.
So spirit guides understand human life and human limitation. Angels, on the other hand, have not had human lives. They may take human form once in a while, but they don't come in to have a human life because they've never had that fall from grace that humanity has had.
Right.
I don't know what religion you are, what religion your audience is, but if you want to understand the role of angels in the Bible, it's in the New Testament, where there's the story of the prodigal son, who goes out and mucks up his life and wastes everything and, comes back. And the other son is like, well, why are you giving him the fatty cap? I've been here the whole time.
Right.
The son that stayed home, that's the angelic kingdom. They're in peace and love and divinity all the time.
Right.
But it does not mean the angelic kingdom does not want to help humanity.
Right.
Literally, angels want to help, and they are task oriented. So if I need help with something, no matter how mundane it may seem to somebody else, I will call on an angel for a specific task. If I need a cocktail dress in my size under $100 by Saturday, I'll ask my angels to go ahead of me and guide me to that.
Right.
You can call on an angel for any part of your life you struggle with. If you struggle with fractions, you can call on a fraction angel, to help a child with their fractions.
Mm-hmm.
One of my friends doesn't drive. And so she called on a parking space angel. She said, that's something I can do for my friends. We have gotten parking spaces at the mall on Christmas Eve, thanks to Beverly, her parking space angel. Yeah.
I love that.
So their roles are different, but complementary.
Right.
And we're allowed to call on angels for anything, parking spaces, math, homework. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be our life's direction. It can be something about tomorrow's test. But spirit guides are more about our soul achieving what we came in to achieve. So they're different. They work together to help us, but they have different roles in our life.
So typically when you do a reading for someone, because most people will say, have your charts done is a terminology I've heard related to astrologist work. But you're actually calling it a reading when you do a reading for someone. So how long does that usually take you? I mean, do you just get someone's birth date and then work from there? Or how does it work?
Well, the information that an astrologer needs to create a chart for you is your date of birth, your place of birth, and your time of birth, if known. I read for lots of clients where they had no idea what time they were born, but they usually know their date of birth and where they were born.
Mm-hmm.
When you have the time, you can really narrow it down, and that makes our job a lot easier. But you take that information and you're really pinpointing this soul popped out into the world at this moment in this world. And your chart is basically a photograph of where the planets were when you came out into the world. You came out into human existence and snap. This is where the planets were. This is what the heavens look like the day, the minute that you were born. So when I'm reading a chart for somebody, I'm going to talk about what's in the chart. But I'm going to talk about what visions I see. I'm going to talk about what their guides say. I'm going to go wherever that reading leads me, which is why I say it's a little bit different. But my clients seem to like it. Like my style of reading is fine with my clients. That's what they like about it.
Yeah.
And my friends will often say, you get that look on your face, Susan, which I'm sure your friends, you're a psychic medium. I'm sure your friends recognize that look.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that it's not necessarily something you turn on and off. When you're intuitive or psychic, that's part of your life. But when I'm with a client, I'm turning those energies towards him or her. I want to hear what I need to hear, see what I need to see for them.
Right.
And so because of that, I think I've become a better reader, better psychic, better everything. Because I will often ask something of myself for my client that I wouldn't ask for myself.
Right.
Like the first time I was reading for somebody and I saw their spirit guides, because several showed up. And I completely freaked out. And my eyes got really big. And I'm backing away from the table. Like, what the heck is this? And she's like, Susan, what is it? What's wrong? Because she was a friend. And I'm like, behind you. You know, like I'm closing my eyes and I'm pointing behind her. And you could hear her trying to talk me off the ledge, like, it's okay. It's all right. I'm fine with whatever they want to say to me in this very gentle voice, while the reader is completely losing it, you know?
Right. That's awesome.
But over time, guys show up. I do my best to interpret for them. You know, same thing happens with passed on relatives. I'm not a professional medium. I cannot make that happen on demand. Right. You know, as a psychic medium yourself, you know, you tune in and they come. I tune in and nothing may happen, you know, kind of thing. But sometimes it does. And the first time that happened, a client had come to me and I'm reading for her. I have the chart, the reading's going well. And this man on the other side just rushes towards me. Looks like an older man. And he's saying, tell her I love her. And I was like, no, go away. Going. And I'm continuing with the reading. And he's like, no, tell her I love her. And I'm like, go away. And my client is completely unaware that I'm arguing with this spirit.
Right. Yeah.
Who is very insistent that I tell this young woman that he loves her. And I was pretty sure that this spirit was her father. But I love you was such a generic message to me. Yeah, that I didn't want to deliver it. It just felt made up. Like, you probably run mediums often struggle with credibility. People just say you're making something up. Right. I wanted something that proved it was them. You know, like the will is under the third brick in the fireplace. You know, like something clear. You know. Yes. And I'm getting this generic "I love you," so I wouldn't give her the message. And he's getting more and more insistent. And finally, I can't take it anymore. I had a pencil in my hands. I just threw down the pencil. Oh, all right. You know, now I've got an attitude with this spirit, you know. And my client's looking at me, you know, a little surprised what's going on. And I said, there's a man here on the other side. And I described what he looked at. And I said, he's very insistent that I tell you I love you. And my client started to cry. And she said her father had died 3 weeks ago. I did not know this. Yeah. And she was in another state. And her family had called her like, it's reaching crisis point, come home. So she drives like a bat out of hell to get home before he passes. And he had already passed before she got there. And she said, I give anything to hear him say, I love you one more time. None of which I knew.
That is awesome.
And it was very humbling for me and a big learning curve for me. Like, Susan, it's not up to you to judge what you get. You pass on what you get. That's your job.
Yes. I just had a reading recently and it was going really well. And then all of a sudden the spirit that I was connecting with said, look at the time, tell her to look at the time. And I said, hey, look at the time. Your spirit that's talking to me is telling me to tell you this. And she started crying instantly. It was her mom's birthday. And she said that was the thing she needed more than anything else was that. And you're right. I mean, there is a credibility factor. Psychics and readings, people that do readings have been mislabeled and junk piled into this stack of charlatan repertoire that really bothers me. And so I know there are fakes out there. I'm not unaware of this fact. But this is part of my life and clearly yours. It's how we wake up in the morning. It's there all day and it's there before you go to bed. Sometimes you even dream about it. It's just part of everything. And so it devastates me when someone is so reluctant. It's like, oh, really? If you could see what I see, if you could hear what I hear, it would blow your mind. It would blow your mind. You know, so I myself, when I do a reading for someone, I don't get any information except their name and sometimes a photograph. And sometimes it's even less. Sometimes it's just a first name and that's it. And for me, when I get details, then it's really involved. And that's where somewhere, and I always meditate and pray, give them whatever they need to hear, whatever it is, let's give them some good news, and let's, do something that's really positive. And it's worked out really well for me doing that all these years. But I know there's that skepticism. I can feel it. I mean, it's there all the time. People are doubtful. In fact, there's a friend of mine that's a psychic, and we were laughing. He shared a story at an open session that he had a ghost look him in the face and say, I don't believe in psychics. And he goes, really? I can see you and hear you, and you still don't believe I'm a real psychic. That's rich. That's great. I had the same type of situation happen, but this was a little more jovial. And my connection with the spirit, he said, I never thought psychics were real, but you can actually see me and hear me. I can't believe it. And so, yeah. So even spirits, when they pass on, are not sure that we are who we say we are sometimes. It's really something.
You definitely have to have a sense of humor. You're in this line of work.
You must. You got to laugh at yourself. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So can you think of a time when you did a reading for someone that you were really surprised? Something really surprised you?
Oh, that happens all the time,
Yeah.
I'll tell you, one time I was reading for this man. He's about in his 40s. He came in and, I don't know, he's some kind of flannel shirt or overall. So it was a little bit of grease under his fingernails. I remember wondering if he was a mechanic or somebody that worked on cars or something. And I'm reading the chart and I'm confused because what I'm seeing and sensing and feeling from the chart is not matching what I'm seeing in front of me. And that doesn't usually happen. It's usually they join together. And finally, I didn't want to insult him or offend him, but I was so confused. And I actually asked him, is this your real name? Because I couldn't figure out what was going on.
Right.
And he was like, yes. Why do you ask? And I said, I'm confused because what I'm seeing in front of me isn't matching what the chart was about. The chart had an elegance to it. And I'm like, this chart is 3-piece suits and CEOs and meetings and big towers. And what I was seeing wasn't that. I mean, his grammar was a little off. And I said, this doesn't make sense. It feels like a play or something. And he started laughing. He said, well, I was kind of testing you. I didn't want to gut any phony astrologer. And it turned out he was the CEO of this company.
Honey.
And he tried to present me a wrong image because he didn't want to look stupid, didn't want to look like he was taken advantage of. And we both laughed about it. But I was like, wow, that is going through a lot of trouble to make sure that you're not being lied to, kind of thing. So he actually liked that I picked up or asked him about it, but it shocked the bejesus out of me that somebody would go through that much trouble to actively try to deceive me. You may like your reading, you may not like your reading, but most people don't go out of the way to give you a wrong impression, but it was kind of cute. We had a good time and he liked his reading, so it wasn't a problem, but I remember just being shocked, so surprised. Yeah.
I bet. So have you had a reading that scared you?
One time, long time ago, many years ago, this woman came in. She started to talk about the other side and reincarnation, spirit guides. And I'm thinking, oh, she's, clearly experienced and on this path. And so I'm reading for her. And she says, well, I channel. And I said, oh, okay, that explains your familiarity with what I do. And she says, I've been channeling this spirit that started out nice, but has now gotten very mean. And I think he may be Satan. And I'm sitting there like, you're channeling Satan and decide to come to me for a reading? Like, holy shitballs. Like, what do I do now? Like, this is not in the book.
Oh my gosh. He's like, excuse me, I need to leave.
And I'm like, okay.
Oh my gosh.
And then right in front of me, her face starts to change. I mean,
Not
literally,
good.
physically, I'm watching this woman's face change.
Mm.
And she's saying, "Oh, I think he's trying to come in right now." And I said, "No, he's not coming in right now. Nobody's coming in right now. Nobody's in charge of this reading except me. And whoever you're
Good.
challenging is not welcome here." And I kicked him out.
Good for you.
I had to clear and cleanse the room. I had to clear and cleanse myself.
I'm sure.
And I said, "And what you are doing is dangerous."
Absolutely.
She was kind of raspberry channeling and all this kind of thing. And I was like, this is not a toy and this is not a game. And I ended the reading and we stopped. But until I regained that control, those few minutes were very uncomfortable.
I bet. I can imagine that would have been really startling. Absolutely. Yeah. So how did she respond to you taking charge like that? What did she do?
Also,
that must have been something.
She accepted that it was my office, my reading. I was in charge. She didn't try to fight me on it. Good. And she never made another appointment with me, for which I was very glad. You know?
I bet.
I don't want to have to be dealing with this.
Yeah, no.
So it probably turned out the best, and I don't think I ever had a reading other than that one that scared me for some sort of dark reason. Like when I first saw spirit guides, that scared me because I had no experience, but there wasn't anything wrong with that, you know. First time I saw a spirit coming towards me, I was a little like, ooh, I can't do this. But that's different than what this woman was experiencing and doing. That scared the bejesus out of me. 40 years, one reading. Most of my readings are fabulous.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think that's because you set the... Have you ever done work with numerology?
That's okay. I haven't ever worked professionally with numerology, but I've taken some numerology classes, and I have a good friend who's a numerologist, so I'm a little familiar with numerology. And she was using me to practice on. And I don't know how old I was at the time, maybe 50, 55, something like that. And she said, well, Susan, going forward, and numerology has like layers of different lengths of time. And she was like, all these lengths of time, your challenge is 0. And I'm thrilled. Oh, great. I finally get to a place that's good in my life and I have 0 challenges. And she very sweetly pats my hand. No, Susan, it means you have all of them. And I was like, crap. Trust me to set this up so I have all the challenges the rest of my life. You know?
Wow.
But again, you have to poke fun at yourself and kind of laugh at it. Sometimes I've looked at my chart versus my numerology and this kind of thing, and my life path number and the different years. But that for me is fun. I don't do that at all professionally with clients. That's just me, mucking around. Yeah.
Right. So has there been a time when you felt like you wish you could do a chart for somebody that you met, that it just didn't happen? Do you ever meet people and think, gosh, I wonder what their chart's like, or really get a feeling for someone that maybe hasn't asked you to give them information? Has that happened?
Sometimes I've met people and thought, wow, I wonder what their chart looks like. Absolutely. But it's more of a passing thought, not something I put a lot of energy into. Mm-hmm. What's more frequent is I'll be watching television and I'll see some politician giving a talk or some entertainer being interviewed. Nothing. I bet they're a Virgo. Like I'll just be looking at that like they're textbook Virgo.
Yeah.
And if I'm interested enough, sometimes I'll go and Google their birthday. And I was right. They're a Virgo. Like I'll start to see that. But most of the time, I'm never going to invade somebody's privacy. And you probably know this as well as I do. As readers, we have to be extra responsible and boundaried and ethical. Years ago, a woman called me up. I was in a very tough place financially, and she wanted a reading for her son, who was 23. And I said, so you want to make the appointment for him? She said, no, I want you to read his chart for me. And I said, oh, is he just too busy, or does he not approve of astrology? And she started to explain to me her son was gay, which she did not approve of at all. And she wanted me to read her son's chart behind his back so she could figure out what she could say and do to get him to not be gay.
Oh, my word.
And I wouldn't do that. I consider that to be unethical. Once somebody is over the age of 18, I will not read the chart for them to somebody else if they don't want me to. So if your child is 19 or 20 and you want a reading with me for them, the first thing I'm going to ask you is, are they okay with this? It doesn't matter if they think it's a good idea or not. Lots of kids can roll their eyes and go, oh, mom, that's so stupid. And go ahead. I don't care. That's fine.
Right.
But if someone says, no, I don't want you to look at that, I'm not looking. They're an adult. They're able to make that decision for themselves. And I have to respect that.
Right.
But up to the age of 18, I do lots of children's charts for their parents, especially when they're younger, because I think that's a parent's secret weapon. You start to understand your child from a different point of view.
Right.
Oh, they're not trying to bother me or be a bad kid. This is why they do that. So I always look at a reading as a parent's secret weapon. They start to understand their child better and they can make better decisions. So I'm not picking on Gemini, but I always tell the parents of Gemini children, I'm like, don't buy the new band equipment, buy used. They're going to get bored and do something else. Save yourself some money kind of thing. So, and if you're a Leo child, I tell their parents, praise them, praise them, praise them. Right. Their sign, Leo, needs that recognition. They need the applause. That's what motivates them. Not because they're little egomaniacs, but because that's part of what they're learning about in their sign. And if you deny them that, they'll start to act out in other ways. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
but that's like oxygen for a Leo. Yeah. They need it.
Yes.
Yeah. Definitely.
So I love doing the charts of children for their parents. And then, of course, you can always do couples readings. And I just laugh because when I'm doing a couples reading, especially if they're together, sometimes one or the other will be there. But if they're both sitting there together, and I say, well, his chart shows this. So what he's going to do is blah, blah, blah. And she'll go, yes, he does it all the time. She's like, finally, somebody validates me. But then I'll be switching and I'll say, well, her chart is geared more towards this way. And this may be uncomfortable for you as she does, ABC. And she does it all the time. So they're hearing this from a third party who doesn't know either one of them.
Right.
So they start to realize, oh, they're not doing that to annoy me. They're doing that because that's part of what's going on in their chart. So I think they start to hear things that they don't hear from their partner. We tend to tune that out. They're always complaining about this. But when somebody else says it, they tend to hear it more. So I love doing that. I mean, there's charts you can do for couples, for children, for businesses. If you're starting a business and you have a beginning date for your business, you can run a chart for that. Financial astrologists just concentrate on the finances. I don't do that. There are, you can do a yearly reading, a monthly reading. There's a chart you can do just for a simple question. Maybe you don't need a whole big 1 hour, 90-minute reading. Maybe you just want to know, is school A or school B better for me? Right. Let me do a question. Run a question chart. I can answer that. Much less expensive than a whole reading. So there's many, many, many different kinds of ways that you can use astrology and work with astrology to make your life easier. Because that's what I want astrology to do. Yeah. Astrology readings can say, don't step there. That's, move over here. Avoid that big mud puddle. Right. Astrology can make our lives easier and help us avoid problems. Sometimes just because you've heard it before. I remember reading from a friend of mine's daughter. She was 18 and she knew her mom's friend Susan was an astrologer and she wanted her own reading, not what her mother would tell her. So he set it up and I read for her. And it was fine. Years later, I think she's in her early 20s, maybe 23 or 24. She said, Susan, do you remember when you told me that because of this Mars and how it was placed, I needed to be really careful about who I was dating and be careful of their temper, because that can sometimes come out a little aggressively. Mm-hmm. And I said, yes, I remember. She said, I dated somebody once who hit me. And she said he apologized right afterwards. He said he didn't mean it, blah, blah, blah. But I remembered what you said, and I protected myself. And she said she found out later he was much more aggressive with another woman he was dating. She said, I got out early and I avoided that trap because of that reading, which, was years before. You never know. And I'm sure you realize this in your own reads. You never know what's going to stick with somebody. You never know what's going to make a difference to them. Yeah.
Well, and I feel like,
your best.
Yeah, the way you're doing readings, you wouldn't necessarily need to read your partner if you read yourself enough, and you could get enough information to figure out what your weaknesses and strengths were so that you could make better choices. So I think it's very constructive. Do you get a fair amount of people asking for career advice?
Oh, lots of times. Because subjects that you're good in, that you're talented in, areas of life where you may shine working there, they show up in your chart. That's, you don't even have to dig for that. That's like right out there in front, almost hitting you in the face. Yeah. And it's a strong moment when I said, well, you know what? You're really gifted as a writer. Have you ever thought about writing anything? And she says, oh, yes, I've actually written 2 books, but I never submitted them to publishers because I just figured I didn't have any talent.
Oh, funny.
I'm like, well, your chart seems to think otherwise. Your chart seems to think you have a lot of talent. So I'd submit those books and see what happens,
Right.
Lots of times I may point out artistic gifts or creative gifts, and I'll say, what do you do for a living? Oh, I'm an accountant. And I'll be like, I never would have picked that for you because your chart seems to lean in another direction. He goes, oh, I hate being an accountant, but it pays the bills. And a lot of people are in this situation. We have mortgages and we have to buy groceries and we may have families. We don't always have the luxury of quitting a well-paying job that we're not that satisfied with to do something that's much more emotionally fulfilling. And I understand that. And I'm never going to tell somebody, oh, just throw this away and go do this, because you have to balance. And this is what I always seek to do, the astrology, the spiritual, the higher energies with carpools and stopping at the grocery store and paying the bills and working together with the practical and the spiritual. But I will encourage them to make time for that. Do something that feeds that part of you because it will make your life happier. Take a voice lesson, sign up for an art class, grab your spouse and go for dance lessons. Feed the creative side of you because it's going to make the whole rest of your life happier. Right. So, I think a reading can sometimes give us guidance and hints and ways to be happier in a life that's often challenging. I'm in my 70s. I did not think this is what was going to be going on in the world. I thought I'd be sitting on a porch in a rocking chair,
Oh, sure. Right.
That life would have all my questions answered and I could coast. And that is not what is happening at all.
Do you believe that it's like a good idea to get your chart done every 2 years, every 5 years? What do you think is a good time frame?
At a minimum, you should get your chart done once a year.
Okay.
But how often you get your chart done really depends. If you're looking for a predictive reading because you're looking at the future, it depends on how far in the future your astrologer went. Okay. If your astrologer talked about what's coming up for you for the next 3 months, then month 4, you might want to touch up and get another reading. If your astrologer went for a year, then certainly get another one after that. I don't have a set amount of time that I will put in there because sometimes there's tons of stuff happening in the next 3 or 4 months and you want to concentrate on that.
Sure.
Other times there's something like, oh, this is going to switch and this is going to happen later in the year and I'll go for a year. Occasionally I'll go longer than a year. So think about how far in the future your reader went. And then when it feels like it's hitting that point, get a touch up, go further. Sometimes clients will ask me about specific things in the future. Oh, my husband wants to put in for this job. If he gets it, we'll have to move in 27 or 28. What does that look like? And that's fine. Because in astrology, you can just keep looking further and further and further in the future. One time, many years ago, I had a young woman who had just turned 18. She had a reading with me. She was very upset in a very hard place in her life. She'd broken up with somebody. Her parents were divorced. She was a little lost. She didn't know what she wanted to do. And she was really talking about she didn't think her life had any purpose. And wouldn't it be better to just leave life right now? And it scared me because I realized I was talking to somebody who's suicidal, and I'm not a therapist, and I wasn't sure what to do.
Right.
And so I absolutely referred her to somebody I knew who was a therapist and suggested she do that. But what I also started doing is I started to go much further into the future in her chart. And I started seeing really good, very positive things happening for her. And I started to talk to her about, in 5 years, this is going to happen. Or in 3 years, this page is going to turn. Or in 10 years, I see blah, 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 whatever it was. And we ended the reading. And this woman has no idea that for years after this, I prayed for her. Like she haunted me. She stuck in my chart. I'm like, I so hope that she got some help. And I didn't hear from her again. And 14 years later, her mother saw my Facebook page or my website or something and let her know. And she contacted me. And she said, all those positive things that you told me made a difference. And she had turned her life around. She had met somebody. They fell in love. They got married. She had a good job. She had a good life. She said, that reading gave me a lot of hope. So you never know how further down the road you're going to go. You just, whatever's there, whatever you need to share with them, you share. But I would say a minimum of 1 year and more if you're going through a tough situation or, a divorce, or you had to, rehome your dog, or somebody died who you love, or you're changing jobs. If you're having big things happen in your life, you need more readings, not less.
Right. So when you do a reading, are there programs that you use to track astronomy? Like, do you find yourself looking at the night sky at things from time to time? Have you become more into that as part of your journey? Or is there just resources that you use to help track things like that when moons are shifting and, the retrograde things that you mentioned earlier? How do you track all that? How do you find that stuff?
Well, there are astrology programs that you can use to track all that. And big events that are astrological in nature often make it onto the news.
Yeah.
Like a big lineup of planets. Everybody's talking about early April. We're going to have 7 out of the 10 planets all sitting in the sign of Aries. And I heard about that on the news, and other people who are not astrologists are talking about it on their YouTube station. So the big things often make it onto the public arena, but there are astrology programs that you can track those kinds of things. You can also get a free astrology chart. Astro.com will provide a free astrology chart. Astrolab, I know, does a free astrology chart. Most of the regular public doesn't really care. They mostly just want to know, what does this mean for me? Right. 7 planets in Aries, what does that mean for me?
Right.
And that's how I gear my readings towards, because they don't care about the astrology of it. They care about, what do I need to know to work with this the best? In January, we had the planet Neptune move into Aries. In February, we had Saturn follow, and Saturn and Neptune bumped up together in the sign of Aries for the first time in over 5,000 years.
Wow.
These are big things. These are the things that make it onto the news, and the things that I talk about a lot. Every January, I do a predictions talk for the upcoming year. And I say, these are the things that I think are going to happen in 2026. Right. And then I track it. Like, was I right? Was I wrong? Did it happen, but sort of differently than how I languaged it? And I try to see how good am I at looking at astrology, and how do we use that to track world events? Because there's something called mundane astrology. And every country, as it comes into being, has an astrology chart. Our country, the United States, is a Cancer country. The Cancer rules food. The United States has a weight problem, but we're also looked at as the breadbasket of the world until recently, maybe. So you start to look at how does that energy come out in that nation, and you start putting the pieces together.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So if somebody was interested in astrology for their own benefit, for their own education, in this day and age, what would you tell someone to do? If somebody just said, gee, I don't even know what my horoscope sign is, how would you tell them to start looking into that? Where would they go?
Well, it's a little late, but you could sign up for my beginning astrology class because it's 8 weeks and the first class is tonight.
Nice.
And if somebody doesn't have a chart, I provide one for them. And then over the 8 weeks, I teach them the basic building blocks of astrology. Here's how you read a chart. Here's how you can understand your chart a little bit better. But there are lots of, God knows there's tons of books out there. I give my class a bibliography, but one of the first books I would tell people to read is the first one I picked up, and that is Linda Goodman's Sun Sign. And it's nothing but descriptions of the 12 sun signs. And each sun sign is broken down into, this is what a Virgo man is like. This is what a Virgo woman is like. This is what a Virgo employee is like. This is what a Virgo boss is like breaking it down into different ways to give you a very full picture of each one of the 12 signs. So if you know what your sign is, read what she says. If you're thinking about your mother, your father, your sister, your brother, your boss, this is where you look. And in the first place, I would tell people to try to get a better understanding. I wrote this article once about the astrology of your boss. And I wrote a little description about what is an Aries boss like versus, maybe a Capricorn boss or something, And some friends were like, oh my God, my boss is an Aries. This describes him exactly. And I'm like, okay, so you don't approach him this way, you approach him that way. And
right.
You know when to not ask him for a raise. And, again, very practical ways of working with this. So yeah, Linda Goodman's Sun Sign is a classic. I don't think it's very expensive. After all these years, it's out in paperback. But I would tell them to look at that for a good, solid understanding of each sign. Or find an astrologer somewhere. Nowadays with Zoom, it could be anywhere in the world.
Sure.
Contact them. Talk to them.
Yeah.
Get a feel for them. Do you like this person? Do you trust them? Would you want to sit and listen to them for an hour?
Right.
One of the things I always did before I became professional, I'd want to get a reading. I'd ask them about the money. What do you charge? Can I pay you in 2 months? Can I break this down into 2 payments or whatever? How can you work with me? Do you have a scholarship program? And most people do. I've had people put their readings on layaway. I'll pay you $20 a month until it's paid for. And I have no problem with that.
Right.
I record their payments. And when they've got the money that their reading is paid up, we set up a time and date for this. Most genuine readers of any kind that have value, integrity, ethics will do their best to work with you. Right. Now, occasionally, it's very rare, but occasionally I've had somebody not act in an ethical way with me. Like they were going to send the second payment and they never did and just ghosted me. Like I have had my share of people who have not treated me that well. And I've had to toughen up, which is hard for me. And it's hard for a lot of readers to toughen up.
Yes.
But I start to get a feel for where are they at? What is their style? How are they looking to work with me? So talk to them, and find the one that's right for you.
So I have a question for you, and I don't know how real this was or was not, but a few years ago, I remember seeing some news stories about there being a 13th horoscope sign that was missed, that it was somehow lost over the years, and that there were actually 13 signs and not 12, and it changed all the dates. And I tried tracking it for a brief amount of time because I was very curious about it, but it seemed to kind of fiddle away after a while. Do you remember when that happened? How that came out in the news?
Yeah,
and do you know much about it? Or
I don't know a lot about it. I can't remember if there are 2 separate things that I'm thinking of or they were joined together. Several years ago, there was a big to-do in the newspapers about your sign isn't really your sign, and you thought you're one sign, and now they're saying, no, you're something else. And I started to track that and look at that. And what they were really doing was looking at sidereal astrology, which is more Eastern, instead of tropical astrology, which is more Western. So for Western astrology, it didn't change anything because I had all my clients calling me up going, I thought it was a Scorpio. I love being a Scorpio. Now they're telling me I'm supposed to be a Leo. Like they were freaked out. I'm like, no. In Western astrology, you're still a Scorpio. You're good, you know. And then I do remember hearing about this 13th planet, but it didn't work. I think what they had sort of looked at was an asteroid. And we're looking at this asteroid as a 13th planet, but it just, it didn't track. And so it just lost momentum like air coming out of a balloon, you know?
Yeah. So can we talk about Chinese horoscopes for a moment?
Okay. I don't know a lot about Chinese horoscopes, but I'm game if you want.
I find that Chinese horoscopes.
Horse.
Okay. And have you heard of the fire horse years?
No, I'm a water horse. And so I've concentrated more on water horse energy. One of the things that I discovered in researching water horses is that in China or in Asian countries, when it is going to be a water horse year, the rate of miscarriage and abortions goes up. And that in Asian families, it's not considered auspicious to give birth to a water horse child. And that is because water horse children are considered to be very independent, very disruptive to the family dynamic. You know, they are not going to listen to anybody. They're going to go in their own direction, extremely independent, which in my family has certainly played out. So in a culture that really values harmony and working together, a horse energy can be a bit challenging. Fire horse energy is not considered as challenging as water horse energy, because consider that it lifts up the family, lifts up, that fire element of warmth. Think of it that way. You know, in astrology, all the fire signs have a kind of warmth that people like and are drawn to. So they're very charismatic. And so fire horse energy is considered more positive than water horse energy.
So I have an unusual story about the fire horse years. So in my quest to learn all about astrology in junior high, I picked up a book on Chinese horoscopes out of curiosity. And I looked up all my grandparents. And this is what's kind of fascinating. So one of my grandmothers had 3 husbands that all died under strange circumstances. Just random, odd things. For example, one of them slipped on the ice and went in, to the hospital to get his leg repaired. He'd broken his leg and whatnot. And he died 2 weeks later from an infection that he got in the hospital. Again, not unheard of, but unusual. A very healthy person, broken bone, but he ended up dying within 2 weeks. Things like that happen. One of them had a super healthy health food nut, died of a heart attack. So anyway, I look up her birthday and she was born in the year of the fire horse. And the book that I got from the library said women, not men, women born in fire horse years will have difficulty keeping a spouse due to unusual deaths. And that was my grandmother to a T. I just thought that was crazy. Yeah, because otherwise she was really dynamic.
I've never heard that.
Yeah, she was a very cool person and did a lot of very progressive things for her age. She worked a long time in Chicago, and back in her day, if you were over the age of 30, you were not supposed to stay employed as a woman. You were expected to go home. And so she actually got her birth certificate changed to make her 5 years younger so she could keep working. But
and that's horse energy. Very independent.
Extremely. But clever and, very, she never wanted to drive. So she always took the bus, but she was fearless. She would go anywhere. She was very outgoing and very fun. But the whole relationship debacle just made me sad for it. It's like, well, that's kind of crappy to be doomed to not be able to keep someone you love because you're doomed or you're cursed. It just seemed like a strange thing. I've never heard of something like that in astrology. So Is there something like that that you've heard in American astrology for the signs, of things, unusual things that tend to happen to certain signs that surprised you? I'm really putting you on the spot, Susan. Sorry.
No, I haven't seen it in a way. It's okay. I'm trying to think back on 40
Sure.
years and see if there's
Right.
anything
No, I
like
get
that.
it.
Not in the way you're describing related to the chart, but when I was studying with my spiritual teacher, one of the things he told me, and I never forgot, and I relate it to my reading, is to look for recurring patterns in somebody's life, because those recurring patterns are pointing you to a karmic situation. So are you the one that always keeps getting the bad boss? Are you the one who always keeps getting the boyfriend or girlfriend that's cheating on you? Are you the one that always gets stuck holding the bag? Like, what are your recurring patterns? Because they are pointing you to something karmic that you came in to deal with. And it doesn't stop until you change the pattern. So if you're constantly getting boyfriends that are cheating on you, why are you attracted to that kind of person? What are you doing? How do you look at that as, how do I heal this karma in a more positive way and less painful? And you can often see recurring patterns in a chart. You know, I call it, well, most astrologers call it the rule of three. When you see a certain energy show up in the chart 3 different ways, they can't get away from that energy. It's like it's going to hit them right in the face. It's as if that person put an exclamation point in their chart that says, by God, I'm going to deal with this lifetime, or I'm going to know the reason why. Right. So they have to start to learn how to deal with that, because that's not going to go away. Every time they turn around, boom, it's going to hit them in the face again. Right. I see that a lot in terms of love and romance. You know, in astrology, Venus, of course, is a planet of love. And so let's say Venus is in the sign of Pisces. Very beautiful, very loving, compassionate, romantic. But Pisces is also what we call a little foggy. Pisces rules fog. It rules things that are not clear, not what they seem to be. It rules magicians and used car salesmen. It's like the hand is quicker than the eye.
Wow.
So everything may not be as up and up as you think when you've got your Venus in Pisces. Right. So let's say you have Venus in Pisces, and then the 7th house often rules love, marriage, and romance. And let's say you've got the sign Pisces over that house. Okay, boom, we're seeing it again. So you start to see patterns continually recreate, continually show up. I'm like, oh crap, she's got this over here and she's got this over there. She's going to need to be a little extra aware to make sure she uses that in a positive way instead of letting it hit her over the head in uncomfortable ways. Right. And so when people do have that energy, it's not a bad energy. Every sign has its high side and its shadow side. We all are proof of that. We all live that. But I'm always telling them, I don't care how smart they are. I don't care how well they present themselves. You do not ever lend them money. You do not let them come live with you after the 3rd date. You know, you just have to be a bit more careful. You just tell them, on the advice of my astrologer, I'm not investing my life savings in your new scheme. You know,
I love that.
So there are repeating patterns that we see, and then we have to find a way to share that.
I love that. Do you want to just give us some closing thoughts?
That's fine.
Okay. Oh, you had some paranormal things you were going to talk about.
Well, I will say this year, 2026.
Okay.
Oh, well, I will tell about the time I saw a ghost.
Okay.
Because I thought it was kind of cute. You know? For once, I wasn't scared. I thought it was kind of cute. I live in North Carolina. And in Pigeon Forge, in North Carolina, we have this Titanic exhibit with lots of original things from the Titanic. And the museum is very well done. You get a card with somebody's name and position on it when you enter. And you go through the whole exhibit. And then when you leave, you can look and see if your person survived. Like, did I make it off the ship, or did I drown or whatever? And so they have all different kinds of things from the Titanic. And it's absolutely fascinating. So if you ever get a chance, go and visit him. And we were walking, friends and I were walking through the museum, and I saw a little boy. And he was kind of around, darting around. And he had a little cap like you see in the 1920s, like newsboys selling newspapers with a little cap. And I thought, oh, how good. He came up to him like as he's getting in the spirit of things. And he was running around and he saw me and I saw him and I'm kind of smiling and we're kind of darting around. And then he darted around this woman and I kind of darted around like, I see you. And he wasn't there. And I was like, oh, this is new. Okay. That little ghost running around and having a good time.
Right.
And he was enjoying himself. He wasn't bothering, but he was enjoying himself. And I was like, and so I started looking at the names to see if there were children. Like, was there a little boy about this age who died on the Titanic? Paranormal experiences, some people want them, some people don't want them. Some people think they want them, and then there's when they happen. It's a friend of mine was told an elderly woman was one of her spirit guides, and if she wanted to meet her, she could do that. The woman would appear for her and come to talk to her. And so my friend was very excited. And that night she turned down the lights and she just had like a little candle glowing. And she called on, I don't know, her spirit guide, Dorothy, whoever it was. And she was very quiet and still in the apartment. And she heard shuffling footsteps coming down the hallway like an old woman. And she said, never mind. I don't want to know. She wanted to turning on all the lights. She said, you just help me from there on the other side. Like it freaked her out. So sometimes we're uplifted by paranormal experience. Sometimes we almost pee in our pants at paranormal experiences. Mm-hmm. But the more you're working in this industry, the more open you are to having them and having it in an uplifting way, I think. But that's just me.
Yeah. So, no, that makes sense.
So I think everybody should have a reading. I think everybody get a reading at least once in their life.
Right.
If you want a reading with me, you can book one on my website, which is www.exploreastrology, exploreastrology. And you can book any kind of reading you want, natal chart, predictive, couples, child, whatever you want. Not me, somebody you trust, somebody you like. I will say on my website, every month I put out absolutely free predictions for every sign. So You can go to my website and you can read what I write is supposed to happen for Sagittarius or Aquarius in the month of March. I don't charge that. It's my way of giving back to the community. And every day on Facebook, I have 2 Facebook sites. One is Susan Reynolds, just me, and one is Explore Astrology with Susan Reynolds. And every day I post on those sites, the moon is doing this today. This is what you can expect. These are some things to watch out for. So this is my living. I do want to be compensated for my work, but at the same time, I want to give back to the community. So that's my way of sort of balancing that out, is to provide free stuff and paid for stuff.
That's great. I think that's a wonderful idea. And I appreciate you mentioning that you have a Facebook page that people can find you at too. Because I know there's times I'm just curious, what's coming ahead or what people are seeing, because I have different modalities that I work in as a psychic. And so I'm always fascinated to hear what, people in tarot are finding and what astrology people are finding, what numerologists are doing, because to me, it's all the same sciences to me. They're just different aspects. It's like branches on a tree. We're connecting with the other side. We're connecting with the higher consciousness of the universe, and we're getting feedback. And I feel like that's vital. I feel like we all need a little bit, just to help us get through things or to encourage us to move forward or to let go, whatever it is that we're struggling with. We all need that. It's like we all need our grandma energies and our family energies to just support us. And I think that's what spirit guides are for. I think that they're basically one of your best friends. They're there to help you. They're not going to do things for you. You got to take care of yourself. But yeah, you need a hand sometimes, and you need an arm around you sometimes. And sometimes you just need someone to sit there in the quiet with you while you process whatever it is you got to process. So, yeah, I love all that. I think that's very useful and helpful. So Is there some
Absolutely.
closing thoughts that you would like to add for somebody who's been apprehensive about astrology, let's say? Someone that says, oh, I heard astrology was made up in the 1930s. It's not real. What would you say to someone who's a real doubting Thomas when it comes to astrology? What would you say?
I'd say check it out for yourself. Have a reading, see if you respond to it or don't. And if you don't, that's okay. Not everybody does. You don't have to. People ask me, I don't believe in astrology. Astrology is not a belief system. It's not a religion. You don't have to believe in it. It's a tool. And I liken it to going to an investment counselor. You're paying them for their professional advice. The investment counselor may say, well, I think gold is a good investment, but get out of these stocks. And you go home and you decide, you know what, he's full of crap. I'm doing what I want to do. You're allowed to. Astrology does not rule your life. It does not make your decisions for you. You are in charge of making your decisions. But it's always nice to have a little extra and help and advice. And that's what astrology is there for.
And I love that you're putting it in that way, because who doesn't like good advice? If you hear something that's uplifting, that helps you have a better day, even if it's just for the day, why wouldn't you want that? Maybe you don't believe where it came from, but isn't it nice to hear good news once in a while, or something constructive that maybe frames your life choices in another way that you hadn't considered? What's wrong with objective, constructive ideasm? Why not look at something in another way that's unfamiliar? Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So what would you say to someone who thinks that astrology is satanic?
I'd say you're wrong. Programmed in that way.
Yeah.
But that is the furthest thing from the truth in terms of astrology.
Yeah. I agree. Now, do you have historic information? I'm sure this is part of
Thank you for having me on. I've had a great time talking to you.
Well, I'm so glad. I've enjoyed chatting with you as well. It's been lovely. And I feel like you've expanded the subject of astrology quite a bit. I feel like you've really touched on all the things. It never occurred to me to get an astrology reading for a business. That's fascinating. Who would have thought of that? I mean, I certainly never considered that. That's great.
If you know the first date, you hung out your shingle, we can always do an astrology reading for your business, because you're a professional psychic medium kind of thing.
Right. That's amazing.
So absolutely.
Well,
I'm going to say I had a great time, and I hope you invite me back again sometime.
I would love to have you back again. This is Holly from Holly's Pandorium saying thank you for sitting with us and enjoying this time with Susan. This has been a blast. And I would love to have you back again, Susan, because this is an endless subject. I could talk to you all day. This is lovely. I find this subject absolutely amazing. So this is Holly. And just like my friend Jay likes to remind me, please hit the like and subscribe. It helps other people find my page that have similar interests. And thank you again, Susan, for your time. This has been lovely. You can find Susan again at www.exploreastrology.com or on Facebook. Thank you, Susan. And we'll be back again soon. Thanks, everybody.